Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok. My partner in crime, Vasili Gianarakos, is not here today. I'll be running solo. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I won't go too much into detail, but nothing serious. But Vasili had kind of a, let's say, minor accident at his house, hurt his arm. Nothing, catastrophic, but figured, it happened last night. I told him to take the day off. We both agreed that it would be best for him to just take the week off and just focus on his arm. It's not broken, luckily. Seems to be more of like a deep bruise and a pretty bad cut. So he spent the night at the doctor's yesterday. So send him your well wishes. I'm sure he'll be fine by next week's episode, but didn't want to force it as well. So yeah, just send him your well wishes. And again, I love Vasili, and it was unfortunate news, but the fact that he's okay and that it's something that he's going to recover from, I think is what's most important. It's not anything that's going to cause like long-term damage or anything like that. It's just kind of a bad week, so again, feel free to send him a message or whatever with your well wishes, but he's gonna be okay. I, on the other hand, was battling a cold, feeling much better today. Finally, felt awful all the way up until the Flyers game last night for the past 4 days, but finally back, and I'm ready to go. So I'm gonna rant kind of on my own today. There isn't a ton of specific topics to talk about as far as, kind of news. I'm going to get into some trade conversation. There's been some stuff going on Twitter, obviously, and Elliot Friedman making a statement that has kind of, been fed into now by others, and Daily Wire, Frank Savali. So I'm going to get into that a little bit and just my opinions on that specific trade that's been rumored, but also in general, just kind of trades. We're not into silly season yet, but as we kind of ramp up throughout the year, I'm sure there's going to be more and more trade rumors. I've talked about this quite a bit on the show before, but, I need something to talk about. So we're going to talk about a little bit about trades. And also, I'm just going to go through the entire kind of roster today and talk about my thoughts on every individual player on the Flyers. So it's going to be a little bit of a messier of a show, but I'm just going to kind of go off. So before I do, I just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified on when we release these episodes. Typically, it's recorded, anywhere between Monday and Wednesday, unless we have to do it on a Thursday. We have done that. We've done other random days, but we try to make sure we give you one episode a week, and we work around Flyers games. So the Flyers did play last night against the Vegas Golden Knights. So I'm recording today. And then they'll be up against Nashville on Wednesday, right before the holiday. And then, we'll go right back into that cycle next week. So again, for the audio version, go to Spotify and iTunes, hit the follow button there if you can. Give us a rating if you can. All of that is incredibly important to us. Our subscriptions, our follows, our reviews, all that stuff helps tremendously. Obviously, we're kind of in the midst of the season right now, and not like a lot of big events going on besides, games here and there. So we're not a big rumor show. Like, we don't love to talk about rumors. We don't make one-off videos most of the time based off of rumors. So if that's something you guys want, it is something I can start doing. It's not my thing, but I'm cool to start adding some supplementary content. So if there is stuff that you guys are interested in, leave, information in the comments. It would be, Vasili and I can talk about it. And there's also time periods where I can do content alone, or he can do content alone, and we can figure out stuff like that. Beyond just the original show. We've discussed other stuff, but again, I'm still working on a side project that I haven't really told anybody about, not related to hockey at all. Only if, hand select full people really know about it at the moment. I'm just not ready to make it a public thing. And, I work full time, and Vasili also works full time, and he is gearing up to get married in the late spring. So got kind of busy lives right now, but again, we do this primarily for fun. So it's fun to make videos. So let me get into the sponsorship stuff, and then we can get into the actual hockey talk. So just want to remind you to shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's at 4th and South. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. They are open. They are remodeled. They really do have really great cheesesteaks. I mean, the smell alone, if you are in the vicinity, will just take over. So if you find yourself in that area, or if you find yourself down for a cheesesteak, Jim Steaks will get you in and out too quickly. They do have long lines, but they're a machine. So make sure to go to Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Also Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. They will be your facilitator between you and the insurance company. They will help you handle all of the annoying, aggravating parts of dealing with insurance companies and dealing with claims. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sporting news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, make sure to check out SportsSpider. SportsSpider's link is in the description of this video. It's in the description of all of our videos. It's also in the description of the audio version as well. Make sure to check out SportsSpider. Our stuff is pinned at the top, but they're a good site. Definitely make sure to check out SportsSpider.com. Okay, so we'll start off with rumors. Then I'll get into to overall Flyers stuff, and then I'll end it on primarily just prospect updates like what Vasili and I do. Only I'll do that kind of on my own. Big rumor going on. I've had some regrettably contentious conversations with people, very minor. I tend to not go into back and forths on social media anymore. It's just a complete waste of energy in the outlet of the podcast. I'm usually in my head like, save it for the podcast. Don't need to take it out on some one individual that I disagree with. That we would have a much more nuanced conversation if it was a conversation. And just social media in general, not just Twitter, kind of leads to these brief try to wins. But the big rumor that's going on, and this was also happening last season, but is now reignited because Elliot Friedman has kind of made it a little more public that he's speculating that the Flyers could be involved in trading for David Jiricek from the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, again, this is speculation, but let's be honest here. Elliot Friedman is maybe the most tapped-in guy in the industry. When he says something, it's understandable that everybody reacts to it. Also, Frank Cervalli brought it up on Daily Faceoff. He also, very tapped-in guy, also tapped in Philadelphia, being from the area. By the way, we share the same barber. Interesting little tidbit, Frank Cervalli and I. That's Sean Walsh in Northeast Philadelphia. Give him a shout-out. He's a phenomenal barber. But there is, this rumor is kind of perpetuating, and I'm seeing online, and I'm not going to lie, I got a little frustrated, probably unnecessarily so, because on one hand, I totally understand why people are interested in David Jiricek. It is not crazy. You're not crazy to want the prospect. If a guy like that is available, of course, you need to investigate and find out what is really available. I realize I forgot to turn my light on, so I'm going to do that now. What is available in that type of trade? Like what would you have to give up to get a guy like that, right? So in the case of David Jiricek, being a former 6th overall pick, it's not going to be a trade that's cheap, right? Like, he's 20 years old. They're not trading him for nothing, right? Like, that's not going to happen. And they might not even trade him, but he has had trouble kind of getting into the league. Now, the Flyers did have an option to draft him back in the day in 2022 at 6th overall. They opted to go with Cutter Gauthier at 5th overall. So, the interest was definitely there. I don't think he was their second choice in that draft. Let me go back to that draft real quick as I'm talking about this. I don't think he was their second choice. I think it was a lot of assumptions made. But if you look at the guys who were kind of drafted around him, it does kind of make sense. Like, top of the draft was obviously Yuri Slavkovsky. Simon Nemec was obviously gone at that point. I would imagine that was maybe the Flyers. That was probably their top D man. I don't see how not. Logan Cooley went at 3. I think that was the Flyers' number 1 forward choice. Number 2 was Cutter Gauthier. Shane Wright ended up going at 4. Gauthier at 5. David Juracek at 6. Kevin Korchinski, another defenseman who kind of struggled to make his way into the NHL. Marco Kasper at 8. Matthew Savoy, he was recently traded to the Edmonton Oilers. He has not made his NHL entry yet. Pavel Mitinyuk, I always say his name wrong. I actually suspect that he might have been higher than David Juracek. But this draft so far has not panned out in the way that a lot of people anticipated. Most players on this list have not done too much. One of the guys who actually performing the best is Matthew Portois, who was drafted by the Bruins in the second round. He was a teammate of Jet Luchenko and made the NHL. Shockingly, in his second year, that was not anticipated. But it looks like Jet Luchenko almost followed in his footsteps this year, at least making it even a year earlier than Portois. But so far, he looks to be one of the best picks from the draft. Again, another thing that I talk about where this is what I want to bring up is like draft rankings don't really matter retrospectively unless the guy has performed. They're more an anticipatory value, right? Like, for instance, Nolan Patrick was a second overall pick. At the time he was traded, his value was an all-time low. Like, I still do not believe that the Flyers did not know that Ryan Ellis had a problem when they were trading for him. They traded injury-prone Philip Myers and an injury-prone Nolan Patrick. What is the likelihood that the guy they were getting back had injury problems? Pretty high, okay? I have a very... Now, maybe there's some kind of NHL ruling that I don't know about, that they're supposed to hide that stuff, their knowledge, and maybe if they didn't pass the physical, the trade would have never been allowed to go through. I don't know. But I find it very hard to believe the Flyers didn't know they were trading for an injured player, because what GM would take Nolan Patrick with head injury risks, Philip Meyer with his risks, for a solidified top 4 guy while you're competing for a Stanley Cup? Just saying, there had to have been some information that Ryan Ellis had some injury concerns, probably not career ending. I don't think that Nashville knew that with Nolan Patrick too. But, the risk was there, right? So let's go back to David Juracek. So everybody wants David Juracek. I saw Forrester in a first for David Juracek. I saw Farabee in a second for my boy Chris Mayer, which I think that one to some extent makes a little more sense, though I think the second-round pick throw-in is completely unnecessary. And this is kind of what I wanted to address first is I see this every year. Flyers fans, and I don't think this is unique to Flyers fans, okay? I think this is something that is unique to Twitter, right? Is you see people wanting to make trades and they want the player, so their position is always from a position of weakness and need. So they go, oh, well, I'm down on Joel Farabee, even though he's a former 14th overall draft pick. I'm down on Joel Farabee, so I want to trade him for another guy because this guy has potential. And Joel, in my mind, Joel Farabee's 4 years older, so I'm done with him. And I'm willing to even throw in another second round pick, which could be a high second round pick, which is essentially almost a late first round pick, especially in a draft like this upcoming one, with that is a deeper draft. I'm willing to throw that in as well, just to go out and get this guy who has yet to make the NHL. on last year was arguably the worst team in the league, at least one of them. This year they've improved even with the losses they've had and the unfortunate loss of Johnny Gaudreau. They're obviously playing much more as a team. Give them credit. They are not a bottom of the league team right now. So I guess it would make it a little harder for David Juracek, but Juracek is 20 years old. Again, I am not low on David Juracek in the sense that I don't think he's not a good prospect or he doesn't have value. I kind of see him like Oliver Bonk. Okay. I really like Oliver Bonk. Do I think Oliver Bonk is a franchise caliber player? At this point, I have not seen that. Is it possible? Of course, it's possible for David Juracek to be a franchise caliber type of defenseman. I don't see it with David Juracek. I think he's always been a raw tools type of guy, right? Like kind of like Pavel Zacha, who's a really good player. He is playing top line center for the Bruins. He's not a number one center though. He's probably ideally like a number two center. Could he still get better? I definitely think that's open for Zacha. He's not that old. There's still probably another half a gear up there. Maybe he could end up being like an 80-point player in the league, which would make him closer to a number one center. Really good player, had all the tools, all the gifts and all the tools, and you look at him on paper and you go, this guy has a really high ceiling. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't work out, but that's the problem with the guys with the raw tools. And Cutter Gauthier is another example of that, who the Flyers drafted him on raw tools. There's a risk involved with it, right? And Cutter Gauthier has developed better so far than a player like David Juracek. They're the same age, right? About easier for a forward to make the NHL than a defenseman. Again, I'm not saying that David Juracek is a bad prospect. My point is that he is a risk. I am not looking to move away from our only natural left winger that belongs in a top six position, plus one of our most valuable assets, which we will probably need in this offseason or in this trade deadline in some capacity, for a guy that is still a risk. The option of trading for Tyson Forrester, I mean, that only comes up because he's struggling in the beginning of this year. Ask anybody who was watching the team last year in the midst of what Forrester was doing last year, would you have traded Forrester for David Juracek? I think that is crazy. I don't know if that's something that's like a widespread thing. I'm sure the Farabee one, and you didn't hear, if you listened to Tortorella's press conference today, after practice, he defended Joel Farabee because nobody's talking about him because he's not putting up points, but he actually is playing really well. It actually kind of reminds me of Tyson Forrester's season last year where he was doing all the little things really well, but wasn't getting rewarded offensively. And let's be honest, if you watch that game against Vegas and you watch that top line, the chemistry that was immediately formed with Farabee and TK and Coots, that is pretty exciting. Michkov has been able to play well everywhere, so I'm not as worried about getting Michkov back up there. Plus, they clearly don't want to put either TK or Michkov on the left-hand side, at least for now. So it makes sense. And Tippett seems to have better chemistry with Frost than he does anybody else. So, that top six, I think it's a good idea to go with the pattern they went with. And this is something that I talked about, that Vasili talked about. We talked about it in our preseason previews, that Joel Farabee is a candidate to play on the top line. Most people who think 24 is a developed player, I don't know how many more examples you have to see of guys like even Scott Lawton, TK, Sanheim. People pretend like this is like, oh my God, it happens almost every time. It is more likely for a player to hit another gear in their second half of their 20s than it is not. The difference is a lot of players who do that, they're just not that good. Right, like Anthony Richard, okay? One of the best call-ups I've seen from the Flyers for that above 26, 27-year-old player that kind of couldn't find his way around the NHL. He probably has hit another level in his career. He showed that he was a point-per-game player with the Flyers in the short stint he was here. He's an NHL player. I don't think he's a top six forward, but I do think he has a middle six role on probably a mediocre team and a scoring role on a third line for a good team. I think he is that good. He probably has continued to develop to this point. He wasn't just magically in the minors all this time and then all of a sudden is lights out with the Flyers. He was good in preseason. He's been good every step along the way. He might max out to be this, what he is. He's 27 years old. He's in his prime. He's hit his prime now. And this might just be what he is a decent third line scorer. A guy who can maybe chip in 30, 40 points a year in a third line role. He's not going to be great defensively, but he's got speed, he's got skills, right? Like this does happen to most players in the league. They hit those 20, just some of them go overseas and become those players overseas where they get paid more money. Jordan Wheel is a guy right now dominating the KHL in his late 30s. He's like, again, maybe he would have a better role in the NHL. Maybe not, but most players hit their stride at that point. So anyway, let me go back. So the idea of trading for David Jiricek is interesting. I'm not desperate for it. This is not a trade that's top of my list. I see a value in him, but I also look at the fact that we have Drysdale, Zamula, York, and Andre. And those are already, and Bonk coming next year. Those are 5 young defensemen. Where's the room for Jiricek? And let's be honest, trade probably won't happen overnight. You'd have to theoretically trade away one of those young guys or one of those older defensemen. The Flyers are having trouble balancing 8 defensemen in the NHL right now. You're not going to send Andre back. The only thing is like, okay, could we swap Zamula for him? Okay, what do you need to add to a trade like that? Zamula is not going to get it done right now for David Jiricek. He could be a package, right? He could be one piece, maybe three pieces moving for a David Jiricek, maybe a first, a Zamula, maybe another prospect, maybe a second. And then you start talking about now you're piling on assets where you really need assets. You need all of the leverage because David Jiricek is most likely not your icing on the cake player. If he was, he would already be playing in the NHL on a mediocre to very bad hockey team. Now, that does not mean if the Flyers trade for him, it's a bad trade. My whole point is I doubt it's going to be at the cost that people are referring to online. I don't think the Flyers are moving Tyson Foerster at all. There are worlds where that is possible, but it's going to be for an upgrade. And quite frankly, that's why I would prefer to have my assets. It's like I'm not targeting David Jiricek. If I'm looking for an established young player in the league, that's what I would package multiple assets for. For example, Jack Eichel was available. That was a player at the time. I was even willing to move Patrick and Konechny to get Eichel. But he's a guarantee. He's a guarantee at a top line talent. That is what I would be saving my assets for. Not David Jiricek, who's now going to have to compete with Oliver Bonk to make the team next year. Plus, we still have Risto on the team. We still have Sanheim on the team, right? We still have Sealer here. And not including the young guys. So then do you swap Jamie Drysdale for David Jiricek? I would imagine that's actually an option that Columbus would be open to. Jamie Drysdale for David Jiricek. But are the Flyers realistically low on Jamie Drysdale already after he had surgery? It's possible. It's unlikely. So really, your options are to trade maybe more of a guy like Bobby Brink for David Jiricek. And again, you still run into the numbers problem. So my whole thing is just it doesn't sound realistic. Now, maybe Jiricek is part of a bigger trade and there are more assets moving from team to team. That is possible. The Flyers are looking for a centerman. Obviously, Morgan Frost's name has been going around. On one hand, I totally understand. I brought it up on the podcast myself, right? He's up for a new contract. He's not doing well statistically, having said that he had a great game against Vegas, the best game he's had in a while. That overtime move that he made, like, oh man, if he would have scored that, the narrative on him in that game would have been wild. Did contribute for a goal and assist. Hopefully it speeds, kind of gets him back up to where he was last year. He's also not that old. He's 25 years old. And even if he doesn't top out to be a number one center, even a guy who plays a third line center role ultimately, but has a scoring upside, plays responsible defensively because he has been, and can chip in 55 points, that's a really good asset. That, and in fact, for a late first round pick, that's not bad at all. It's not bad at all. He's never been a bad pick. He was a 27th overall pick. He's not a bad pick. I don't know if the Flyers are rushing to move him, but theoretically you could have some kind of, Frost package for a Eurocheck package that moves multiple pieces and helps teams fill the gaps that they need. Like maybe it's Frost and Zamula and a first for David Eurocheck and, another good prospect, maybe a center prospect that the Flyers want to get younger on. These are possible. I just don't think they're likely. And I get why everybody talks about them. I could be proven wrong, of course. A trade could happen tomorrow. This video could come out and the Flyers trade for David Jiricek. It's possible. I talk about this all the time. I put my head, my position, like my mindset comes from that position of I wanted to be GM of the Flyers. I don't think about like what do I want to see on the ice. I do partially because I'm a fan. I'm not GM of the Flyers, obviously. But I think about it, from a long-term view. I think about it from a strategy view. I think about it from an asset view. And one, I never devalue my assets. I never do what people do on Twitter. We go, this guy sucks, get him out of town. You almost never hear me say that. And because I don't believe that. And also, it rarely turns out to be the case. Like every year, you see these crazy, trade proposals, and majority of them become, if the trade actually happens at the end, is like underwhelming to people. It's because GMs are not looking to go out there and overpay for players unless they are a guarantee, right? In the case with Florida, when they trade for Matthew Tkachuk, they gave up a lot to get Matthew Tkachuk. First, Mackenzie Weegar is a really good offensive defenseman. They gave him, and they gave it Jonathan Huberdeau, who at the time was coming off a 100-point year. Did they know you'd cut that in half? No. They thought, at the worst, he'd be an 80-point player, right? Point-a-game guy, which is still a damn good hockey player. He's still an all-star caliber player. But they paid a lot to get Matthew Tkachuk because Matthew Tkachuk is a game changer, right? He's a consistent top-line elite power forward. They're rare, and he is probably skill-wise about the same as Huberdeau, but all of the other elements about him, his work ethic, his mentality, his leadership skills, they all kind of, make him more valuable. And you see the consistency in his game as well as above Huberdeau, who is having a much better year this year. Seems to be getting back on track. But Mackenzie Weegar had 20 goals last year as a defenseman. So it's like, again, they paid a lot. Those are the times where you typically see those type of trades. And like in the Cutter Gauthier trade for Jamie Drysdale, it was Drysdale in a second for Cutter Gauthier. So I think in this case, if you see a trade for David Jiricek, like realistically, that's probably around the territory of what they would look for David Jiricek, who you could say is comparable to Cutter Gauthier, but Cutter Gauthier was kind of an all-time high value with, what he was doing in college hockey. Jiricek's perceived value is a little bit lower, not much lower, but he's also a defenseman. He's also right-handed. So all these things kind of balance out. It would most likely be like a second-round pick, maybe Anaheim's in particular, and a younger player. Like that's, and younger, like not 24, like 20, 21, around David Jiricek's age. Because Columbus is also kind of in a rebuilding phase, unless it's like a legit top guy from our team, which they would have to add David Jiricek plus, and we're not trading that guy anyway. Like David Jiricek plus for Owen Tippett, right? We're not doing that trade, and they're not doing that trade. Flyers are not trading Owen Tippett. I get that a lot of people get impatient, and understandably so. You're a fan. It's not your job to play GM, right? It's not your job to be patient. I talk about patience. Again, that's the mindset I come from. But I definitely understand why people are impatient when it comes to sports team. One, life is short, right? And you don't want to suffer every year. You don't want to buy into something and then always be underperforming. And like last night, the Flyers were up 3-0 on Vegas. Then they have a 4-2 lead, and then they lose the game in overtime, even though they definitely, in my opinion, outplayed Vegas. Like 80% of that game was all Flyers. That outside of that 19-shot second period where they played like really, and Torts said it too, 7 minutes of mediocre hockey. The rest of the game, they played really well. I think they should have won that game probably 4-2. Should have, would have, could have. Samsonov was, I can't say exceptional because he gave up 4 goals, but he made some ridiculous saves. The Flyers had definitely the better scoring opportunities all throughout, and were robbed several times by Samsonov on the butt end of the stick. And it sucks. It sucks to be disappointed in sports. So I get why people want trades. I get why people want David Jiricek, but I think it's a little bit of a pipe dream. Like, how many people actually have watched David Jiricek enough to know what he's actually worth in value? I would almost guarantee none of the people who are making these trade proposals. They're all going off of surface level analysis, and I am too, for the most part. But I also understand the value, in my opinion. Could be wrong, obviously. Toot my own horn, but I also understand that the value that's online is typically inflated, depending on the team's current position within like the wins and loss columns, right? If you're in a position of strength, your fan base is not going to be willing to give up much. If your fan base feels like you're struggling, they're willing to throw everything out immediately. Like, there are people still talking about giving away assets to get rid of Risto, even though he's been the Flyers' third best defenseman this year. And he's looking great, but people are still talking about him like day one when he was struggling in Buffalo. It all goes on the perception of the team. So the thing I walk away from, I don't see this trade happening. I could be wrong, but I think the Flyers kind of have bigger plans. And I think if we're hearing about it before it happened, it probably fell through. I think Columbus and the Flyers did talk about it. I don't think that is out of the realm of possibility. I definitely think they talked about it. So it's interesting to think about. It's fun. Not a lot of news going on right now with the Flyers. Just kind of, hockey games, the stuff that I care about more. But we'll see. There's going to be a lot more rumors throughout this year, especially as we get closer to trade deadline and the Flyers have a better idea of where they're going to land. Guys like Scott Lawton, who a lot of people have given up on the idea of him being traded, but I think this is actually the optimal year to move him now, not last year. His value is probably about where it was, maybe a little bit lower, but it's not that much lower. And there's going to be a numbers game here. The Flyers are going to make changes. And, with the emergence of the way Travis Sanheim has played, it's, becomes more feasible from a leadership standpoint. So let's get into the actual. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to just go through every single player on the Flyers. And I don't know. I just wanted to have fun with it, to be honest with you. I just wanted to go through players in the lineup and talk about their season and just give quick thoughts on each one. I didn't really come in with a full format today because there wasn't too much to talk about. I was kind of like looking for topics and I'm like, I don't have Vasili here. I'm just going to have fun with this episode and talk about the things that I want to talk about without having to, have an actual conversation. I could just sit here and talk to myself. So let's talk about Joel Farabee. I'll start off with him. Top line left winger, Joel Farabee. So Joel Farabee has had an interesting season so far. I can say I'm disappointed to an extent just because I was really hoping for a better offensive production. I could say that about almost like all of the forwards outside of a couple of guys. But Joel Farabee, I think, has done a lot of the little things right. He's playing very hard. He's playing smart hockey. He's just kind of having some bad luck, and we saw it against Vegas. He was everywhere. I'm actually really excited about the prospect of him playing with TK and Couturier because I think, he kind of keeps getting relegated to the third line, playing with like younger guys. And I think he's a guy who needs a confidence boost right now. And I think putting him with TK and Coots, who both of them are playing, I'm going to get to TK, but yeah. But Coots seems to be kind of becoming the guy that he was last year, prior to feeling I get his injuries. Let's be honest, he had 3 injuries that he was playing throughout the year. So putting him with those two guys, I think could get him a lot out of it. I think he's had a decent season so far, offensively below decent. As far as two-way, I think he's done a good job, but I think he needs to do better. And I think there's still very early in the season. I know a lot of people like to say, "Oh, it's the 20-game mark, and this is what you define what your team is." And I don't believe in any of that stuff. You'll know what your team is by the end of the season. And the reality is you can be a bad to mediocre team, have an excellent second half, and make the playoffs. So, and it's happened quite often, and a lot of times those teams have gone to the finals or the Eastern or Western Conference finals. So I don't buy into that narrative. And the same thing with player performances. There's a lot of guys who kind of start off slow and then pick it up as the second half goes on, or start off red hot and drop off, right? Like Joel Farabee was red hot in the first half of last year, dropped off in the second half. I would say like realistically last 1/3. The first 2/3 of the season, he was excellent. So I think that side of him is still there. I'd like to see if they can get that back out of him. And then people won't be talking about him in trade rumors anymore. Yeah. So Joel Farabee could be better, but not too bad, especially considering he's a year younger than Tippett and Frost, and they're both struggling. So it's kind of, they're in that 25-year-old. I still believe in Joel Farabee's ability to develop into being that guy. He has a lot of leadership abilities too that come with his personality. So I'm interested to see if he can get out of the funk, the offensive funk. There's a few guys that fall under this category. So the other one, I already mentioned them, Sean Couturier. I think he's played well in pretty much every single game. I think the offense has started to really come on. Against Vegas, he was moving very well. He's obviously had that big game with Minnesota. He's start putting up some goals here, couple back-to-back games with goals. I think we're going to see more of that from Sean Couturier, but the coaches also believed in him a lot more, and using him in all positions. He's using him like the number one center, which he is. He's not the dynamic number one center who puts up 100 points or 90 points, 80 points in the league. I think there's still a chance he can get back up to that, but we're obviously still getting to the, he's never even an 80-point guy. He was like 75 to 80. But if he can get back up to like being a 60-point center, that's a great guy to have on your team as a second-line center because he can play immense defensive minutes. And I think Tortorella needs to rely on him more to do that, but I think it's kind of difficult because he doesn't have a true number one center, like an offensive play driving center. Otherwise, he would use Coots probably more in a defensive role. So I think Coots has been really good of late. Started off okay, got better, and I think he's playing his best hockey right now. And him and TK have been probably the most consistent pairing we've had for a few weeks already, since that Minnesota game, honestly. Yeah. So let's get into Travis Konechny. I said in the beginning of the season I didn't pick him as the team's MVP. I feel stupid about that. I picked Matvei Michkov, and now I feel even dumber because I was thinking about it today. I was like, I said that TK had another gear, and he has hit that other gear. He is on pace for 100 points this year. I don't think he's ever going to be top 5 in points by the end of the season type of player, especially with a team that lacks other offensive weapons, like a number one play driving center. I don't think he can do that type of stuff on his own. But the fact that he's on a 100-point pace without that right now just shows he is a legitimate top-line player. I've been saying it for a while. I've heard so many people saying, oh, he's a second-line player on a good team or what. It's bullshit. He is a top line player in the NHL. He is showing it. He's playing even better than he did last year. He's a damn good hockey player in all situations. He is dynamic. He is fierce. He is fast. He has a weird playing style where like you don't really know if he's a sniper or a playmaker or a grinder. It's kind of like a mixer of all three. Because you wouldn't necessarily call him like a two-way forward because he's not perfect defensively. He's just kind of like a power forward mixed with a everything, you know? He plays a lot like a power forward for a small guy, but he's dynamic at the same time. And he's become more dynamic this year than he was last year. So really excited about TK. Shows that contract was extremely appropriate, which I didn't have a problem with the contract or the term. And I thought it was crazy at the idea of moving on from him. And right now he has been the Flyers' best player, at least on offense. I'd say easily. Most consistent. Again, the only guy above a point per game pace on the team. 26 points in 22 games. Pretty damn good by Travis Konechny. I want to see if he can I want to see if he can continue this throughout the entire year, because then it's official. He's hit another level. This is going to most likely be the best season of his career. Let's get on to line 2, Owen Tippett. Tippett has been completely up and down this year. He seems to be kind of back in that middling confidence. Like when he's confident and he is just skating his ass off and just shooting, he's at his best. When he's hesitating, he disappears a little bit more. He's had some really big games where he hasn't scored but played really well. And then he's had other games where he's looked completely invisible. It's a little surprising, but when you combine that with everything going on with this team offensively, it's not that surprising. You know, you need a team around you to do these things, and he's not the only one who's been struggling. I imagine that if Frost's game can come back, Tippett can feed off of that. They do have really good chemistry together for a combination of reasons. You know, being friends for a long time. Also, Frost is fast. Tippett is fast. They can keep up with one another. They kind of know where they are on the ice. I do expect Tippett to at least finish in like the 20-goal mark, but he has come on slow. He's probably going to start scoring in bunches, but it shows that he's not exactly quite there. He hasn't completely broken out. We thought it happened last year because we saw like good chunks of the season of it, but he's probably still in that up and down range. But we really need him to get going, and I imagined he's probably putting pressure on himself to do that. Either way, $6 million contract for a guy who's most likely at least a 20-goal scorer every year. I don't think it's the end of the world, but he's got more there. There's something more there behind him. The skill is there. The shot, the skating, it's there. The team needs to play better as a unit. They're starting to, for that to come out. Morgan Frost, talked about him a little bit already. He looked absolutely invisible in a lot of games this year, which is weird because he was one of the only guys who came out in the beginning of the season with fire. And he looked so good in preseason and then kind of just disappeared. Again, this is another guy like Tippett, like Farabee, notice a pattern. They're all about the same age. All young guys that they so heavily drive off their confidence that when they're not confident and they're not moving their feet and they're kind of, clutching and not shooting, that it spirals on them. I think that's what happened to Frost. Defensively, I think he's been absolutely fine. Even good at times defensively. He's far from where he was in the beginning where he's a liability out there on the ice, which is a good thing about him. And Tortorella benched him, but we know why he's benching him, because he wants him to be an X factor offensively all the time, or at least 80% of the time. And for whatever reason, he wasn't. He showed great flashes of it against Vegas. And I think if he can do that on a regular basis, he won't be benched again. But his future with the team is in question because of his contract status. He's an RFA. I don't know. The Flyers are going to look to make moves. And I almost guarantee you there are several teams that would be interested in taking on Morgan Frost. Because they would have the same thought that a lot of GMs have, right? Well, what could that guy do here? It's the same reason why we would be interested in David Juracek. Well, he's struggling over there, but what if we get him under Brad Shaw, right? There are teams who also will put themselves in that position. Sometimes they're right. just a change of scenery, a new coach, a fresh start for the player. So I'm not sure if Frost is going to end up being a Flyer next season, but that's still in his hands. I wouldn't say he's run out of time, but he's hurt his chances, at least in the short term. Matvei Michkov, second line right wing. Look, man, we've been talking about him every night. Michkov has been everything that I thought he was going to be. I wouldn't even say in more because this is what I anticipated. We've been talking about a while how everybody's been talking about Connor Bedard, and I kept looking at the resumes and the playing and the footage, and I was like, I don't get it. I go, what is there about Michkov that Bedard has but Michkov doesn't? And now the world can see nothing. Nothing. That the entire world of being excited about Bedard, that Steve Kornianos, who's back on the show next week, it was all fabricated by Russian bias, which is real because politics, anytime politics enters anything, you got to take their opinions with a grain of salt. Because there was so much fear over Russia as a nation, and then the players not coming over, that it definitely impacted his ranking. That kid should have been fighting for first overall in that draft. There is nothing about his reputation that says otherwise. Nothing. And it's showing now. And look, maybe Bedard will be the better player in the end. I don't think it's crazy that Bedard has 16 points in 20 games. There's some struggle. Bedard will be absolutely fine and will probably be one of the best players in the world. Like, I love Connor Bedard. I'd love to have him on the team. If we could trade for him and that was a possibility, I would give up a lot of assets to get him. But I think Matvei Michkov has been exceptional. A lot of people worry about his skating, and I pointed this out online. A few other people did as well. If you watch Michkov on the back check against Chicago, and his ability to get back, he was flying. And you never really see Michkov put the Jets on. I suspect that Michkov's conditioning is not as good as it should be. He's not used to this many games, back-to-back games. And he's so hyper-competitive that I suspect going into next season, and again, every single player can go through, and we see with Bedard, can go through sophomore slumps. We always have to be ready for that. But I suspect once he understands the NHL game, the way his workout regimen will change to adapt to that, and he's making money, like real money for the first time in his life, can hire a personal coach. I think there is speed behind Michkov's game. A lot of it. And I don't think he's showing that. He doesn't play that way. He plays deliberate. He never really tries to beat players up the wing by himself one-on-one. I think we're going to see a lot more of that as he evolves in NHL and becomes that 100-plus point player that I think he's slated to be. I think he's been fantastic. I think the line about him being cold-blooded is hilarious. And he has it. He has the hero factor. He has the shot. He's got the stick handling. He's got it. He's got it. And quite frankly, the Flyers were a better team offensively. And they might be as they roll forward. I think Matvei Michkov would have a point-a-game pace right now. I think a big reason why he hasn't put up more points and his assists are down is because the rest of the team is struggling offensively. And you notice that when he's playing with Konechny, the points come. When you put him on the power play with guys who are producing, the points come. It's not just he's on the power play. You see he's scoring at even strength too. It's just a lot of his teammates are struggling to score. And he's had some struggles too. He's flubbed pucks and stuff like that, but that's more understandable for a 19-year-old rookie. Less understandable for, 24, 25-year-old guys. The way they played against Vegas, the passes were crisp. They were on point. If they can replicate that type of performance, everybody on the team will start putting up more points. But again, he hasn't been perfect. Defensively, he's been okay. Some nights not good. Some nights a lot better. But I'd say The benchings have improved his two-way game, which is great. He's been clearly very receptive to Tortorella. So I think that's been really strong. And I'm really happy about that. And I don't doubt his mental dexterity and his willingness to be better and to work with a coach. And again, if you know anything about Russian culture, which I do, I have a Russian sect to my family, at least Moldovan, which is very similar. They're used to harsh. So Tortorella being harsh is really not that big of a deal. Again, he went from a coach who wouldn't even play him just because of his age. Tortorella is at least playing him and giving him big minutes in a better league. KHL, he wouldn't even let him play. So I think Michkov is just hitting the surface. I think he's going to continue to get better, just like he gets better as within the game as the game gets later. I think he's going to get better as the season goes on. I'm not as worried about a rookie wall with Michkov as others. I think with him, it's more about adapting. And I think there's a good chance he might finish close to a point a game, which is a generational pace. And typically players who do that, like your Nathan McKinnons, your Connor Bedard's, your Sidney Crosby's, Evgeny Malkin's, like guys who are all world, all class type of players tend to do that. So we got one. I'll say that we got one. All right, Tyson Forrester, third line left winger right now. Tyson has not been as good as he was last year's second half. Second half, he was exceptional. First half, he was very good defensively and had a lot of bad luck offensively. I think he is like a typical sophomore slump. Had some bad luck, started off good, but then fell into bad luck. Now confidence probably hit there. He hasn't looked as involved as last year either. I still think he's going to be an exceptional player. I still think he's a top line player in the making. He's still very young as well, at only 22 years old. I'm really excited to see him pass this year. But I think also just like Michkov or Tippett or Frost or Farabee, you're looking at the second half of the year. You're looking for the team to hopefully improve their play. Like last year, they were better in the first half and worse in the second half. This year, I'm hoping they're worse in the first half and better in the second half. And I think Forrester falls into that category. I think his two-way ability, his shot, his size, he is just not a player I would move at all. I mean, you look at a guy like John LeClaire and the fact that they have very similar body types, similar shot. I'm not saying he's going to be 3-time 50-goal scorer John LeClaire, Hall of Famer, All-American. But if he's 80% and potentially better defensively, or 60% and better defensively, it's still a damn good hockey player. So I still think like Tyson Forrester is a no move for me. He's not Matvei Michkov, no move. But unless I'm getting an elite player like, top of his class, like I don't even know who to freaking name at this point. Jack Hughes, right? I'm just throwing out a name, right? Like a top guy. I know he's gonna be in my top 3 players. I'm not moving Tyson Forrester. It would require a package, obviously, to get a player like that, but I'm not including Forrester in that package. He's just, I would have no interest in moving him if I were the Flyers. Noah Cates. Noah Cates, statistically, offensively, is disappointed. Defensively, he's been exceptional. I know a lot of people are low on Noah Cates. I don't believe that he will be stuck in this low statistical category forever. I think he put up 40 points, not by accident. I think he has more offense to give. But I think defensively, he actually might be the best of Paling, Lawton. I think the coach thinks so too, which is why he's playing third line center now as well. I think there's a good chance that Noah Cates will be here for a long time. I know a lot of people are down on him. I am not even close to down on him. I want to see more offense from him. He's had some bad luck. Look, he's never going to be top of the league scorer. But if he can be at least a third line production guy, 40 points, that he's awesome. He's a guy I would keep till I won a championship. unless his body gives out. But Noah Cates just does everything right. Doesn't make mistakes. He's maybe the best puck battler outside of Forrester on this team, or Sean Couturier. He's like a poor man's Sean Couturier, making $2.5 million a year. I just love Noah Cates. I'm okay with him playing a fourth line role too. But I love Noah Cates. I'm hoping that him playing with Brink and Forrester and playing third line minutes gets his offense going, and I think that's what Tortorella is trying to do. And so far, it's working. And again, he scored the other night. I think he had an assist the other night as well, maybe 2 games ago. He's starting to put up a little bit more points. It's happening slowly with this team. Again, their disjointed behavior and their sloppiness as a team really hurt them offensively. They spiraled after, the poor goaltending in the beginning of the season. Kind of spiraled. There's like everything was kind of going wrong at different times. And it seems like they're kind of getting their shit together. Again, it's their fault as a team. But I think they can get out of it. And I think we're seeing signs of that. The competitiveness against the top teams in the league. They still got a lot of room. When people say that the Flyers aren't there and aren't good enough, that does involve developing the talent that's here. They still lack, obviously, the number one center. That would be like if tomorrow you added a Nathan McKinnon on this team, this is a playoff team, right? Like, immediately, this is a contender to some degree. They are one X factor center away. So again, this is why I would hold on to my assets, because I want to go out and get one. Via free agency, unlikely. Trade or draft, those are possible. There are teams that are going to want to reset. Somebody will be available. It almost always happens. Jack Eichel wasn't available until he was available. And he won a cup. And he's damn good. Like, you don't have to be Connor McDavid to be a really good number one center in this league. And he won a championship before McDavid. Bobby Brink, third line right wing. I think Brink has done what he did last year, only a little bit better. A little stronger on the puck, a little quicker. He's one of the only guys of the young group I'd be willing to trade, but only because we have Michkov and Konechny. Not that I think he's a redundancy. It's more of like, it depends what the trade is for, but he's a guy I would consider packaging because he has value. I think he probably will be a top 6 forward. And I think we could get something good in a package for, maybe it's Brink and Frost together, right? In a trade to get a definitive top line player. You might have to add, or at least like an awesome second line center, right? I think Brink still has value. I think a lot of people are going to go cold on him early, but the reality is he's 23 years old. He's undersized, and the way Konechny had ups and downs, I think Brink will have ups and downs. I don't think Brink is going to hit Konechny level like point production, but I do see like a 60 to 70 point potential in him. 70 point realistically, I think is a definite possibility for Bobby Brink. And he's not doing too bad statistically so far this year. He's got stuff he's got to clean up in his game, but I think he's okay. I think he can be better. I could say that about almost everybody on this team. But I think part of that is coaching and getting the right momentum going, and the work ethic and the off-season training. It might take another year or two for Bobby Brink. But I do think, the way we were high on Tippett, the way we're high on Farabee, like the guy isn't that far removed from this category. Again, was essentially a late first round pick talent taken in the beginning of the second round. So, I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens to him, especially because Denver Barkey's coming eventually, and that's a spot that Barkey might take. I don't think he's going anywhere now, but this is one of the options that I think the Flyers have to potentially move a guy like Brink in a hockey trade. But I think he's been all right. I think he's gotten better at certain things. And I'm also, same with the other young guys, I'm interested to see how they evolve as the season goes on. Scott Lawton, I think he's had some really big ups and then some big downs. He's been more invisible than usual. He's 30 years old. He's probably got 5 years left of a solid career. 3 years left of prime, I would say. He might have more than 5 years, but that's just an average. I think just with the fact that he has 1 year left after this deal, it might be coming to the end of the road with Lawton. Luchenko will say 90% be on this team next year. Flyers are going to want to make some moves. They love Lawton. He might retire a Flyer too. It's possible. But depending on where the Flyers finish, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he gets moved out. Just because, his role is diminishing on the team. Other young guys are starting to step up, especially if guys improve in the second half of the year. And then leadership-wise, I brought it up already, but Sanheim has become one of the leaders of this team as well. So I wonder if they're less, you take the A away from Lawton because he's moved and you give it to Sanheim, who is the leader of the Flyers back end. So I don't know. I like Scott Lawton. He's a great guy. Valuable player, especially for a playoff team. So that's why I wonder, did the Flyers finally pull the trigger on, a good offer that comes their way, probably a second and a prospect type of offer at the trade deadline. I don't know. I think this is the most realistic time for it to happen, outside of like a contract completely expiring. He's got 1 year left, so the team knows they get to keep him, for another year. I don't know. It's interesting. Might not happen, but you look at guys like Paling and Cates. It's not that they make Lawton redundant. It's just we have other guys who can play that role. And again, Sammy Tuomala is going to need a role in this team. He's a point per game player right now in the AHL. Anthony Richard is sitting in the minors. He's pretty good, also a pretty good player. Yeah, it's going to get interesting. We always thought that Elliot Denoyer was going to replace Lawton, but doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Ryan Paling, similar to Lawton, ups and downs. Some real big ups, some beautiful moments for him this year. He's just a solid guy, great skater, good defensively, reliable. He's a guy you just keep on your team. Honestly, makes $1.9 million. Solid player. Seems to be emerging as a leader as well. Again, another Lawton replacement type of thing. Noah Cates has leadership potential. He's Noah Cates is a very smart guy. I think Ryan Paling was a good re-signing. And I hope the Flyers have a fourth line of this caliber, or at least fourth line center of this caliber for a while. Because he's not just reliable defensively, he's also very fast and gritty. And I think that's what helps. And as being, a pretty high pick, he's got hands, he's got a shot. For that role, this is how you win some of those bottom end matchups that the Flyers do win at times. A guy like Ryan Paling definitely helps with that. So I think he's been good. Not great, but he's had some upsides so far. I think he can be better. He played better last year so far. I could say that about a bunch of guys early in the year so far. Garrett Hathaway, bottom line, right wing. He's just doing Hathaway things. I haven't really noticed a difference from this year to last year. He's just always aggressive. I think he was a little bit better last year, but again, it's more falls in the camp where the whole team played better last year. When he took that shot in the hand against Vegas, it was a little freaky because I'm like, yeah, it's not a guy you want to lose. He's one of the toughest guys in the lineup. One of the best hitters in the lineup, agitator, draws calls. He's a guy that every team wants. And that's why they re-signed him, right? Because and they extended him before his contract was even up. Because it's like you always need a guy like Hathaway, regardless. Like you don't always need Delorier, but you always need a guy like Hathaway. And typically, young guys can't fill that role. They're not experienced enough, disciplined enough, physically mature enough to do it. So you typically need a veteran to do it. And Hathaway's kind of brilliant. He's also a great guy and clearly intelligent. So he's got a lot of really good things going for him. So yeah, I think Hathaway's done his job this year. I think he can still do better, but he's done his job. I think in some ways, as the rest of the team has been improving, so is he. I'd love to see him chip in a little more offense, but I'm okay with him not as well, as long as he continues to do his role, which has been good at both ends of the ice. He's never a liability. All right, let me take a break here before I get to the second half of the lineup. I just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell for notifications. And for the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes. Give us a ratings there if you can. Give us a follow there. The best way to support this podcast is to do that. Okay, let's get into the D. I will say Nick Delorier, he's done a decent job this year as far from the offense standpoint. He's a great fighter. He's a great guy. I just think his role in the NHL is pretty much limited to physical, right? Like heavy physical role. There are times to put him in the lineup. I think the Flyers have better players, Anthony Richard included, like veteran guys who can play in the lineup. So I expect that his games will be minimal, barring injuries, and they have been. So of the defense, top line left defenseman Cam York, I think since he's been back, he's looked rusty. Not bad, but he's not been pushing the pace too much. Expected. He missed a lot of time. He looked better before he missed time. He looked exceptional in the second half of last year. I think we're going to see that again. Be very patient with Cam York. Again, look how patient you have to be with Travis Sanheim. It's going to take a couple more years to see what York really can be. It might not even be his final form, but I do see a potential number one defenseman out of Cam York as well. He is, in my opinion, a definitive top pairing guy. Definitely a complimentary guy who can play with a guy like Sanheim, play against the best players in the league. He already did that last year. But I think there's more to his game too. We will see. Again, give him some time recovering from the injury. It's going to take some time. Oh man, 8 defensemen. Sanheim. What more can you say about Travis Sanheim? I've said it already. I think he's doing what he did at the beginning of last year. I thought he looked like a number one defenseman last year. I said if he continues what he's doing, he's going to be a Norris Trophy candidate, competition, or the conversation. Not that he would win one, but at least he get the recognition. I think this year he's doing it again. In some ways, he does look better. At least he looks more aggressive offensively. Defensively, he's just as good as he was last year in the first half of the season. He's the backbone of the Philadelphia Flyers defense, and I'll say it again, it's the best trade that the Flyers never made. And thank you, Torrey Krug, for turning that down. I hated that trade offer when I heard it, and I'm very happy it never went through. So, yeah, Travis Sanheim has officially arrived, and a lot of people, and I heard Bill Meltzer say this on Daily Faceoff, and I guess Jason Martinez as well, or Flyers Daily, not Daily Faceoff, that they see Travis Sanheim as the number one defenseman, and there isn't much dispute to that based off of his play. Offensively, he's probably never going to be like that 70-point guy, but his play all around with being on pace 50 points is exactly what you're looking for in a number one defenseman. Most number one defensemen are not Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar. They're just really, or Roman Josi. They're really good at, defense and pushing the play the opposite way. And Travis Sanheim has been a machine. Really proud of him, and I think he should be wearing an A. We'll see if he gets one in somewhat near future. He's in his prime officially, so we have about 6 years of this Sanheim if he can keep this up. Emil Andre, rookie. Love him. He's exceeded my expectations in the early going. I knew from everything I heard of him and seen of him, and speaking to Steve Kornianos over the past couple of years about Emil Andre, is that we're always hoping for him to develop to be a Chemo Timonen type. He actually seems like he's on his way to do that. He's different type of player in some ways. He's a little more dynamic than Chemo Timonen. We'll see if he can match Timonen's reliability on the back end. Um, but he has something. He's got like this it factor, this competitiveness, this hunger. It's infectious. He's creative. He is unafraid. Um, the Samuel Girard comparison comes up just because of their size. But Samuel Girard has been a really good top four defender for a few years already. And I think Andre is a legitimate top four defender now as a rookie. And when you see, the Flyers pass on Z Boyum, and you heard the Andre, York, and Drysdale talk, you kind of see their point. People are low on guys, and I still love Z Boyum, but Andre's got something. He's got something special there. He could end up being much better than he could end up being a top pairing defender for all we know in the end. No idea. I don't know. I think it's safe to bet that a guy who's 5'9" is not gonna be. But Ryan Ellis was really damn good, and he wasn't very big. Chemo Timonen was really good, and he wasn't very big. So we'll see how he develops. But I love so much about his game, and a lot of people online called it out that he should be running the top power play instead, or at least one of the power play units instead of Zamula, and I think that is quite clear that is true. He's better offensively. And right now, Jamie Drysdale is injured, and he was also coming back from an injury. I think Drysdale still does a really good job on the power play. But Andre's more aggressive and more assertive and more decisive. And that is really helping him over Drysdale. And I think Drysdale needs to take some of that. The difference between developing a player right and rushing a player into the NHL. Probably one of the best things they did for Andre was not to keep him on the team last year. Bring him up seasoned, cooked, as they say. Love Andre. I think he's going to get some votes in that Rookie of the Year conversation. He's not going to win Rookie of the Year because it's going to be Matvei Michkov. But the Flyers have two excellent rookies this year in Michkov and Andre. I think he scored his first goal, 3 assists. He was a +3. And he looks really good playing with Ristolainen. I like that pairing. Makes sense on paper. Risto's our biggest defenseman. Put him with our smallest defenseman. I like it. Rasmus Ristolainen is back to where he was prior to his injury. We lost him for all last year, so people forgot about him and started to talk about how he has no value again because they love to do that to him. I think he's played great. I think what Tortorella said about him being aggressive and moving his feet is incredibly important, and he's done a lot of that, and I don't think he's ever going to be like a number one defenseman. I don't think that was really in the cards for him, even though he's number 8 overall pick, which is why, again, people overvalue like where a player is taken retrospectively. It's more important what they produce once they do get drafted. But I think Risto at $5 million is officially not a problem, and I think there are definitely teams in the league that want Rasmus Ristolainen. I don't think he'd be a hard contract to move. I don't think the Flyers are that interested in moving on from him. Not as interested as other people are. They have no real reason to at the moment. Again, unless you can make your team better, you don't trade a guy unless you're trying to tank, which the Flyers are not tanking. Nor should they. Look at the teams that have tanked. How well is it working out for them? Chicago tanked. They're much older than the Flyers, and they still stink. And look at what happened to Bedard when he doesn't have support around him. Doesn't help. You do not want to put young players in that position. You want them to have support. You want Risto, or you want Andre to have a guy like Risto to play with. You want York and Drysdale to have a guy like Sanheim around. And you want Grans to have a guy like Sealer. Let's talk about Nick Sealer. I think he had a better season last year. So far, he's been good, not great. Reliable, steady, no glaring issues. I think he's stuck out a little bit more, but he's also had a lot of partners. He's been rotated. He's being played a little bit less, too. I still think he's been solid, and I think his value will increase as the intensity of the games goes up. He's locked up for another 3 years beyond this season. He might not end up finishing, that contract here in Philly. But I like Nick Sealer as a guy. I like him as a player. I think he can play better. But I think he's done an admirable job once again in his spot. I'll do Helge Grans. I'll get to the injured guys and the guys out of the lineup afterwards. So Helge Grans, surprising guy in the lineup. Interesting on how good he's looked in the NHL now versus how good he looked in preseason. He looks better now than he did in preseason. He's a guy who seems to have like nothing about him that truly stands out of the crowd, which is why he'll get forgotten about quite often. But he has a little bit of everything. Like he's got, well, not even a little bit. He's got size. He's mobile. He can pass. He's aggressive. Again, he was with Andre in that crop of same draft and that crop of defensemen that was the cream of the crop for that age group. And Andre was always the best, but he was undersized. And Grans seems to have a lot of complementary upside. I don't know what he necessarily projects to be, but he's right now playing like a bottom pairing defenseman in the NHL and looking like he could maybe more one day. I like Grans. Glad we have him. And we'll see. He's going to be up for a contract too. I imagine he's going to get a bridge deal. But Torts likes him, and he's definitely not here for the whole season, barring injuries. So he'll probably get sent back down, most likely just because of the bodies. But the size also I really like. And he's grittier than Zamula. And they're about the same size. He's a little bit bigger than Zamula, but he plays more of the type of game that Tortorella is looking for. I'm sure about that. Eric Johnson, I think he's been great in his role. Really, really great. The fighting for Michkov, he's been incredibly reliable. He doesn't look slower than last year. He's never really burned anybody, but considering what he is, I don't think they're going to trade him because I don't think he wants to go anywhere. I think he's already has a championship, so I think he's just happy here. I don't know if he's going to retire because he looks like he can still play. He's much better than Stahl was in the same role. So I love having Eric Johnson here, even if he doesn't play. What a great re-signing. Great guy. Again, another reason why maybe you can afford to move on from Lawton and then just bring Johnson back as a number 8 defenseman once again. I don't know if he'd have any interest in being a swing guy from the AHL to the NHL, but boy, would you love to have a guy like that playing with the Phantoms, like a regular in the AHL. He's just probably still too good for the Phantoms right now, and I don't think he's going to be looking to ride a bus after his career. But I love Eric Johnson as a guy. It's almost a shame we didn't have him in his prime because I could have seen him be a loved guy here in a blue-collar city. He's a blue-collar player, I'll tell you that much. Igor Zamula. I think he looked very mediocre at times. I think he's improved. I still see the NHL game. I want him to be more assertive. More aggressive. Again, he's only 24, so this is his second year in the league. Maybe he'll develop that. He is a guy who's at risk to get traded as well, just like Bobby Brink. And I don't know what his future will be with this team because he's in and out of the lineup. I don't think the Flyers are anywhere near giving up on the guy. And you never know. He's only 24. Again, like most defensemen don't touch the ice till they're like in their 23-year-old year when he did. So we'll see. Could be sophomore slump too for him. It is his sophomore year. I know he's been part of the organization for a while, but it is his sophomore year in the league. He doesn't make too much money. He's still got another year on the contract. So potential trade option. I think he's been better of late. But he's lost his spot to Andre, that's for sure. Andre's just better. He's just better. He's better at all-around game. He's better at everything than Zamula. Better skater, more physical, better shooter, better passer, better vision. Um, Better checking than a guy who's like 6 inches taller than him. So it's interesting. Again, injuries are always going to come into play. Uh, so we'll see. Jamie Drysdale. Uh, I still am very high on Jamie Drysdale. I think he started off looking great, and he's gotten banged up. I think a lot of people are going to fall out of favor of him really quickly because they get frustrated quickly. I am not. I still see a very high upside with Jamie Drysdale. I'd like to see him healthy again and back in the lineup and back on that top power play unit, or at least one of them. But I want to see him get more aggressive and assertive and decisive. And I think he will get that. And I think Shaw's going to work with him, and I think he's going to get it out of him. All the skill set is there. I mean, offensively, he has the best offensive tools of anyone on the team. Easily. Probably the best skater on the back end, too. Faster than Sanheim, more agile than Sanheim. Sanheim's just a big body. He's a rover. He's always been more, and now he's just the aggressiveness. You see what happened when Sanheim changed his mindset. I think Drysdale needs to get some of that. But playing a bottom pairing role with Nick Seeler right now, I think would be ideal. We'll see what happens when Drysdale gets back in. I imagine Grons will be sent back down, and Drysdale will be put back in the lineup. Even though they like Grons, it's more important to get Drysdale going than it is Grons. His ceiling is a lot higher. But we need to get him going. I'm not even close to giving up on Jamie Drysdale. That hasn't even entered my thought process. I think his highs could be very high, so I'm interested to see him get back in the lineup. All right, let's do goaltending. Samuel Ersson, I'll go with him first. He's injured. The injuries have been annoying this year. It's unfortunate. There is still a goalie controversy in Philly, obviously. The controversy comes that there's still a lack of stability from a different aspect. I thought Sam Ersson, when he's played, has looked amazing to good. He's had one mediocre game. Outside of that, looks like a starting goaltender in the NHL. And he's only 25. So I think his upside's very high. Probably not like top 5 goaltender in the league, but top 10. I don't think that's out of the question for a guy like that. Top 15? Yeah. I think he can definitely get to top 15. We'll see how he evolves. But his brain, Tortorella was not wrong. He's extremely sound mentally. He's very sound systems-wise. And he's also really athletic, and he seems to have it all. He's not doesn't project to be a superstar goaltender, but does project to be a really good goaltender. And that's really all you need. You really just need an above average goaltender to win a cup. And he projects to be above average. Above average for a top 30. So if you can be a top 15 goaltender, that's championship caliber to me. There are only one starting goaltender on each team. Ivan Fedotov. Fedotov's been good at times. I'm not going to forget the fact that he looked terrible to start the year. He's still given up some shaky goals. He had some great performances since then. He's made some fantastic saves as well. I think he loses the grace that the other guys get because he's 27, but we need to let him develop too. 27 is not an old man. He needs to adjust a little bit more, but he's gotten a lot better. We're no longer as afraid on every shot that goes on net when he's in net, right? And that's a really good sign. He seems like he's been a pretty adequate backup. His numbers still stink, but he's getting better. His numbers in the short term have been a lot better than they were to begin with. So he still gave up a bad goal, in my opinion, against Vegas. Very crucial goal that brought Vegas kind of back into the game. I don't see him as necessarily a starter in the league, but I think he can be a good backup. And we really just need him for 2, maybe 3 years. we'll see how he evolves because he's another guy we have to give him time, unfortunately, because he's also adjusting the NHL and he's been getting better. So that adjustment is happening. Um, we'll see. Alexei Kolosov. Skill higher than Fedotov. Very dynamic. Got a lot of stuff in common. Like kind of reminds me of Jonathan Quick a little bit. Been pretty inconsistent as well. Giving up some bad goals. Made some fantastic saves too. I don't think Tortorella dislikes him. I don't think he's ready. And I'm very annoyed at the idea that he thinks he's above getting sent to the AHL at 22 years old. That annoys the shit out of me. You are not. One, you're not too good to play in the AHL. You didn't even dominate the AHL yet. I think he has starter upside in the NHL. I think his season has been okay at the NHL level. And has been okay at the AHL level. And I think he needs more seasoning, and I think he needs to be playing almost every game for the Phantoms. And now that Makiniemi is out for a substantial amount of time, I'd like to see him go down there and play every game. And I suspect that that's going to happen, and I think they're going to have to talk him out of going back to the KHL. I think he's happy to some degree playing with the Flyers, clearly. And he's going to have to understand that he's going to get a call-up again. I mean, Erson's had injury problems. We don't know if Fedotov can get injured. Like, you're not out of the NHL because you're being sent to the minors, but, like, there's a contract problem here. If we send Fedotov down, we do risk losing him. There are teams out there desperately looking for goalies. Carolina being one. They might not want Fedotov. I don't know. Fedotov hasn't been amazing. But we can't afford to lose a goaltender. So, I don't know. The Flyers are going to have to probably kick this bucket down the road until it pops up in their face. And I don't know. Kolosov has not been good enough to warrant demanding where to play. I think he needs more time in the AHL. Okay, that's the full man roster. I'm not going to go into AHL guys and whatnot. But those are my thoughts on the team. Again, they got a lot to work on. They're still screwing up little plays. It's burning them. They should have more wins than they do. But because they're the third youngest team in the league, this is the shit that happens. This is why I keep saying it is not a young man's sport, and I hate that term. Because a young man's sport implies that they have an advantage, and they do not have an advantage. The advantage goes to the veteran every time. There are more young players in the league than ever, and that is because of the salary cap. If there was no salary cap, you would see more veterans in the NHL and less spread around the world and the AHL because they would be able to pay them to stay. But the game maybe has gotten a year younger on average over the past decade. So maybe less 30-year-olds dominating and more 29-year-olds, 28-year-olds dominating. If you want to call that young, I'm open to that. I'm 37, so to me, that's young. But the Flyers have a lot of work to do. And I think Tortorella needs to continue to grind them down. Like, they need this. No matter who's their coach when they end up being good, they need this. They need the benchings. They need the... I don't like benchings. I hate them. But they need a tough coach. Tough coaches are really important for young teams that don't have an identity and lose discipline and systems and process. They need somebody to hold them accountable to a high standard. So they build it and it becomes ingrained into the culture here. And I think, if anything, Tortorella is doing that. Nobody is allowed to think too highly of themselves unless they show it every single game. That's why he really only praises Sanheim and TK. Because they're the only ones who have shown up every game. Every single game, those guys have shown up. So they're the ones who deserve the most praise. Makes sense. Keep them critical, keep them honest. This team is nowhere near good enough to win a cup right now. And that's what's important. They are good enough to compete for a wild card spot. I think they're still in that territory. And I think they'll be in the fight till the end of the year. Probably not picking high, barring, serious injuries. I think we're looking at another mid-round, first-round pick. Or, they sneak into the playoffs. But this is the reality of it's actually a really good rebuild. To be the third youngest team in the league and to not be a bottom feeder, it's pretty good. I know a lot of people don't see it that way because they go, how else do you find high-end talent all throughout the draft and all through free agency? And I don't know why people keep saying this because it's obviously true. It's obviously true that you can find high-end talent in all kinds of ways and that you can build your team in all kinds of ways. Look at the Vegas Golden Knights. Look what the St. Louis Blues did. Then look at the other dichotomy, right, of how Colorado went through like 3 rebuilds within a rebuild. Edmonton, who had to get the best player arguably of all time to be competitive. And it took them a while to be competitive. There's all kinds of ways of getting good. Look at Winnipeg, who's got the best record in the NHL. Look at the Devils, who got all this talent, got really good, then collapsed, and then now are at the top again. Look at Carolina. Outside of Svechnikov, who do they have that's a number 1 pick in the draft? I think Svechnikov was 2. Nobody else in their lineup is like that. Kotkaniemi, their most overpaid player. The top 5 pick. Sebastian Aho was a 2nd-round pick, I'm pretty sure. Natchez was up there. I think he was like 8th, if I remember correctly. They're not a team loaded with number 1 picks. I just don't buy. I don't buy this. There's all kinds of ways of building your team, and what's important is the Flyers have a shit ton of assets and a lot of young players. And again, if you listen to great interview, it's a little behind the games, but came out. I think it was today. Jason Martinez with Danny Briere, and he talked about it, how his phone's ringing more than ever because he has a slew of young players that people want and a slew of veteran players that people want and a slew of picks that people want. This is why you do not want to move away from that, because in the time where you really need it, you're ready to execute on that plan that you have, and that player is actually available, not a David Juracek, but like somebody who you're like, yes, this is a game changer for us. When he's available, you have the cap room, you have the assets, you have the players to go out and get him. You can find another David Juracek. You have one in Oliver Bonk. What you need is an X factor. You need another X factor. TK is an X factor. Michkov is an X factor. Right now, Sanheim is playing like an X factor. Sean Couturier has been one at one point in his career. Again, older player and also banged up. We'll see how he kind of rolls his career back up. He's getting better and better. But there's so much good stuff going on here. There's no reason to panic, and there's no reason to start trading for whatever's available in the trade market. Make sure it's the right guy. And we were forced to trade for Jamie Drysdale, but Cutter Gauthier would be part of this team if he didn't do what he did. Again, the Flyers aren't jumping to make these type of deals. Not yet. Not yet. We're almost there. We're not that far away from it. Look at the salary cap. We're almost there. They've talked about it publicly. Tortorella has talked about it, and Briere has talked about it, and Jones has talked about it. They've all said the same thing. They are not there yet. They need to build up what assets they have internally. They need to build up prospects and picks and build the young players and get the veteran players playing well. That way everything is worth more. And when you make moves, you get better bang for your buck. It's like playing the stock market and not selling low. Unless you predicted it, and then, we're getting into stock market shit. That's not a great comparison. All right, let's get into the young players. I'm going to end it on that. I'll do my prospect updates, and then we'll call it a show. I'm just going to do what I usually do. I'll go down the list of in the system. Again, I just look at elite prospects. That's what Vasili and I usually do. We just go through the players and their performance. Number 1, Denver Barkey. I believe he had 2 assists the other night. He is now above a point per game pace. Again, started off the season with mono, so you had to expect that he would struggle early on in the season. He has been on fire since then. He only has 3 goals in 18 games, but he does have 19 assists. So he's playing more of a playmaker role so far this year. I imagine those goals will go up. Denver Barkey will be playing his last year in the OHL. And we can anticipate that he will be in the AHL next year. And I believe the London Knights are on a 15-game win streak right now, so that team is pretty good. Ilya Pautov, 20 points in 23 games. He started off like red hot, way above a point per game player, but still kind of resting around that. Really good late pick. He's a long-term project. We'll see how he develops. He's still in the MHL. I imagine maybe not next year, but maybe the following year, he's going to be playing in the KHL, and that's actually where I'm more curious to see how his numbers develop. If he can put up this type of productivity in the KHL, we might have a real player on our hands here. So, but good start for Pautov. On a good team. It's also producing along with his team, so take that into consideration. Oliver Bonk, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points in 19 games, near a point per game pace, plus 13 on the year, doing what he does. His productivity has also gone up of late. I'd like to see him produce more than last year, but we'll see. I mean, it's Oliver Bonk. Really, what we need him to do is be great defensively and build his offensive game when he gets to the AHL. But I love that they're overcooking him. I'll say that. Overcook him in the OHL, and I don't think he's playing in the NHL next year. There's a chance. It's not impossible with a first round pick, but I think most likely the Flyers will opt to get him in the AHL next year and let him cook slowly. They're still going to have a relatively young defense next year, but pretty good start for him. Jack Berglund. He is pretty much full-time playing in the SHL now. He only has 3 points in 15 games, 1 goal, 2 assists. Seems to be, I assume, playing more a defensive role. We're going to talk to Steve Kornianos about him. He was too good for the J20 league, above a point per game pace there, and hasn't really looked back, but we'll see if he can start producing a little bit more in the SHL. Sami Tuomala, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points in 16 games for the Phantoms. He leads them in points right now. He's also going to be overcooking in the minors. I imagine he'll get a call up in the second half of the year at some point, and I imagine he's going to be probably NHL ready next year. We'll see. Could end up being a sneaky good one. Still pretty young, and he could be a reason why Bobby Brink might not be on this team long term. Cole Knuble, 14 points in 11 games, 6 goals, 8 assists. Good start for him. Again, he's a little bit older, but doing well. Jek Luchenko, now over a point a game. Again, remember he was under a point a game last year, or maybe just above. No, he was under. He's most likely going to be maybe the best. He's going to be one of the best centers in the OHL. He's outpacing the other guys in the competition. His team is not very good. Hopefully he does get traded so he can play in Memorial Cup or something like that. That'd be cool. But expect him to go play in World Juniors. I cannot wait to see Jet Luchenko next year. Like, I cannot wait to see how this kid evolves. Do not forget he's younger. He's like younger than Denver Barkey by almost 2 years, right? Because of his age group. Spencer Gill, also a youngin, 14 points in 22 games. He has been one of their best defenders. He's a plus 16 on the year. Good. I'm very interested to see how Spencer Gill evolves. He's going to take time. I would not expect him over with the Flyers for 2 more years. But he's kind of like a Sanheim in that respect that, he's lanky and tall, and he's probably going to need extra seasoning. He'll be playing in the minors probably for a couple of years too. So he's not going to be with the Flyers for a while, most likely. Alex Yernick, still playing against men. He's got 12 points in 19 games. We'll see what happens with Ciernik. He's got skills. Ulrich Excel, 11 points in 16 games, rebounding, doing well. He could get a call up at some point too. I have a feeling his NHL future might not be with the Flyers though. Austin Malloyne. I don't know. I don't know exactly how to say your name. Sorry, dude. Um, he has got 11 points in 19 games. He's playing the U.S. Hockey League. It's actually pretty good, considering he wasn't playing in the USHL last year. So, and a plus 16. So, we'll see. Heikki Rahonen, pretty good numbers, 10 points in 16 games. He was doing a little bit better, at least. It looks like he slowed down a little bit offensively, but it's his first season in the USHL. I suspect we might see a better second half from him. I like his tool set in general. Carter Sutherland seems to be improving, at least offensively. 1 goal, 9 assists, 10 points in 10 games. Offensively, he's definitely doing better. He was rock bottom. He's still minus 14. He was a minus 17 at one point. So it is improving. I suspect the Flyers might actually not end up signing this guy because of the lack of defense for a defenseman. We'll see. Santeri Sulku, I think he might be injured because he has not played more than 7 games for a while. 9 points in 7 games, 6 goals, 3 assists. Another guy we'll be asking. We'll be asking Steve Cornianos about a lot of these guys. Anthony Richard has not played a game for the Phantoms. He's still at 9 points in 7 games. He'll probably get into the next game. Oscar Eklund, 8 points in 16 games. I never really expect him to come over to the NHL. He'll probably have, my guess is this year and next year might resign again and try it out. I don't really see how he fits in an NHL role, but I think he can be good in the AHL. 8 points, 16 games for a 25-year-old just coming over is not bad. Not bad at all, actually. Alex Bump, 8 points in 10 games, 3 goals, 5 assists. I'm still wondering why this guy's not signed. We'll see. He was doing better statistically. I imagine he's going to have a big game. Rodrigo Abels, also 8 points in 15 games. Similar to Eklund, 3 goals, 5 assists. He's a minus 5. Playing third line center now. Started off as first line center. Seems to be struggling a little bit, but the Phantoms are in general. Ben Gleason, the newcomer, he's got 4 assists in 6 games with the Phantoms. He's got 8 points in 13 games on the year. Most likely a permanent AHL guy, but an offensive defenseman. Good value add for the Phantoms. Hunter McDonald, 7 points in 16 games, a +9. That is exactly what we want to see from Hunter McDonald. I don't think he's going to get much of a look in the NHL this year. Next year is his year. And I would just give him time. I definitely think he's still high on the Flyers list, but he's young, guys. He's 21. People were penciling him into the Flyers lineup, and I never thought he was going to be in the Flyers this year. Owen McLaughlin, 7 assists in 13 games. He seems to be offensively struggling, to be honest with you. He was better last year at this point. Alexis Gendron, 5 goals, 1 assist, 6 points in 10 games. Really good for AHL rookie. I'd like to see Gendron continue to score. That is what he needs to do to get noticed. He's got top 6 potential with a low chance of hitting it. But if he can be a top 9 scorer in the NHL level, maybe like an Anthony Richard, I mean, for a 7th round pick, that's really good. Ethan Sampson, improving. Again, in all transparency, I know his father, Sean. We've had him on the podcast. I'm very interested to see what happens with Ethan Sampson. He is improving every year. And I think next year he will be part of the conversation as a potential call-up if he keeps going at this pace. 6 points in 16 games for a guy who's taken very late in the draft. He's a two-way with an offensive touch defenseman, good size, good skating. He's going to need more time, but I'm excited. I think he can do more. I think there are more gears to this kid. He could end up being an actual NHL defenseman. Maybe just bottom pairing in the end, but I think he does have NHL upside. Mateo Mann playing in the queue, 6 points in 20 games, 3 goals, 3 assists. He'll be over with the Phantoms next year, I suspect. Probably ECHL, AHL swing guy for a little bit. But big body. We'll see. Probably pretty good in the queue at this point. Rhett Gardner, underproducing from last year, 5 points, 16 games. Not too bad. 1 goal, 4 assists. Now playing second line center. Again, this is just indicative of how the Phantom season's going offensively. I think it's actually worse than the Flyers. So, not a lot of guys contributing offensively, and a lot of guys underperforming so far, which is frustrating to me. They're sitting around 500 again, and you would think this team would be better at this point. Brett Gardner should not be in the top 6 on your AHL team. He's a bottom 6 role type of guy, whether it be the AHL or NHL. So I'm a little confused by that. Devin Kaplan, still struggling offensively, 4 assists in 11 games, 2 goals, 2 assists. Louis Belpedio, 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists, 16 games. I mean, I like Louis. He could play in the NHL in a pinch. He did a really good job last year doing it. Good leader for the Phantoms. Elliot Denoyer still struggling offensively, 1 goal, 3 assists. I don't know what happened to his offensive game, but it completely disappeared in the AHL level. This again why I don't know if Flappy should be the coach of that team. And he's not the only reason. Noah Powell, again, first year in the NCAA coming from the USHL. Took a little bit to adjust there too, but he's got 3 points in 9 games, 1 goal, 2 assists. Might play in the World Juniors for Team USA. We'll see. He definitely played well in the qualifiers. So Helge Grans now with the Flyers. He had 1 point, 2 assists with the Phantoms in 14 games, but has played better in the NHL. Brian Zanetti, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points in 22 games. Again, I'll never play here. J.R. Avon, very disappointed to see he only has 3 assists in 13 games and a -7. A little surprising. I thought he was going to have a breakout year for the Phantoms this year. Zade Wisdom still playing with the Phantoms, which is good, and starting. 2 assists in 13 games, turning out to be just more of a physical grinder at this point at the pro level. I don't know what happened that first year, but it is not translating at this point. Emil Andre with the Flyers. Don't need to bring him up. Ty Murchison, 1 assist in 14 games. Adam Yinning, 1 assist in 16 games at a -10. Very disappointing year so far for Adam Yinning. This should be his sweet spot. Massimo Rizzo finally playing again. He's a -2, no points in 2 games. He was injured for a while. Give him time. He should be at least an AHL producer at some point. And then Ryan McPherson, no points in 5 games, a -1 for the University of New Hampshire. Goaltending wise, Dragon hasn't played too much of late. He still sits at 19 games played, 2.29 goals against, and a .930 save percentage with 3 shutouts. Still been great in the AHL or in the KHL. Interested to see if he gets increased ice time as the or increased games as the season goes on there. Carson Bjarnason sitting at 5-5. Did mention last week that he had the highest save percentage in the WHL with a .920. Might still be the highest. I'm not sure, but that's what he was highest with last week too. His save percentage still where it was. Goals against average 2.85. So in comparison to what his stats were, these are exceptional for him, and I'm very eager to see him in World Juniors. Matej Tomek, 8 games, 2.38 goals against, and a .910 save percentage. Good numbers, but he's not going to be coming over here, I don't think. A2 Makaniemi, 5 games, 3.03 goals against, and a .899 save percentage. He is injured. Cal Peterson, 7 games, 2.91 goals against, and a .888 save percentage. Crazy that this guy got a $5 million contract in the NHL. He's been okay in the AHL. He's 2-4-1. I don't think it's his fault. I don't think the record is his fault, but I also don't think he's played exceptionally. And then Alexei Kolosov still sits at the AHL numbers of 4 games, 3.29 and at .875, but he's with the Flyers, and he earned his first victory the other night. So we'll see. I suspect he will play more in the AHL this year, though. All right. That's it for me. I managed to go almost 2 hours talking to myself. I thought it would be a shorter episode. I guess not. So I'm going to end it here. Just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteaks from Jim Steaks. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. So make sure to check out Jim Steaks. Also, shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustments needs. They will help you facilitate your insurance claims with your insurance company. Also, shout out to Sports Spider, our partner. Go to them for all your sports aggregation needs. They are an aggregator of articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web about all sports, but especially the Philadelphia Flyers. Go to them. Our stuff is pinned to the top. And also, I just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to the podcast. Hit the notification bell as well to get notified on when episodes come out, usually in the middle of the night. Mondays through Wednesdays are the typical nights that an episode will come out. And also the audio versions are available on Spotify and iTunes. Give us a rating and a following if you can. Those are the best way to support our podcast. And thank you all so much for listening. I hope you made it this far. I hope you like what we do. Trying to get our numbers back up. It's been kind of slow. It's been slow all around, but we're not going to stop or slow down or any of that stuff. But we got a big guest coming on next episode, and I know Vasili will be back for that. So excited for all of you to be involved more. So if you guys have feedback, put it in the comments. I'm looking for ideas on how to improve the show. So feel free to tell us what you like and what you don't like. Yeah. Again, thank you all for listening. Means a lot. It's really nice to have an audience. Feels great. Love you guys, and remember, always stay